Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It is 5:07 News Talk 105.9 WMAL. You're listening to O'Connor and Company. It's Patrice Onwuka, and I'm here with Julie. Julie, our Tuesday, Wednesday. It is the ladies' morning. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Patrice. It is the ladies' morning. We're gonna spend the whole time talking about Larry.
Larry and Meghan Markle.
That's right.
No, folks, we're joking. We have so much news to cover today. All right, let's get into it. We've got a lot of great guests, Julie. At 7:05, we've got Christian Daytalk, the White House correspondent at the Washington Examiner, giving us the rundown on the White House news. At 8:05, Susan Ferrecchio, national politics correspondent at the Washington Times, will be joining us. And at 8:35, Susan Crabtree, Real Clear Politics national political correspondent. We've got all of the journalists who are covering so much Washington news, Julie. It's hard to keep up with, so it's great to be on with you. Our listeners have affectionately called us Larry's Angels. And so hello, everybody out there. And it's a happy Friday as well on top of that. So.
Right.
Let's get into it, Julie. We've got, I think some of the big news everywhere has been about the tariffs. Everybody's tariff crazy. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen with the tariffs? Are they going to raise prices? Suddenly, Democrats actually care about price increases. It's hilarious. I kind of got in a little bit of a shouting match for a weekend show I taped yesterday. A little bit. I don't go there too often, but sometimes I do. When people are just flagrant, like liberals are flagrant, I have to go there.
Yeah,
Can't even get the word out. But
were they denying that they had ignored prices for 4 years?
Yes, I called him out. I said, it's wonderful that liberals care about price increases after 4 years of them telling us that prices weren't rising. And then if they were, it was because they were going to be short term. And then it was because of greedy corporations.
What was the word they used? Was it
transitory? That was the initial term.
Right. Yes.
Until inflation spiked to 9.1%. Then suddenly, it's the greedy corporations or Putin's fault. I mean, they came up with every issue under the book. So it's now tariffs are the big issue. What is going to happen with tariffs? And we know that we're expecting tariffs to go into effect on our closest trading partners, Mexico and China and Canada. Thank you. In addition to the Chinese tariffs. Well, there is a brief reprieve. As of yesterday, President Trump offered a 1-month exemption from his 25% tariffs on certain Canadian and Mexican imports. So this is good. This provides more time for the Trump administration to continue to negotiate on those tariffs, because we've heard from the Mexican president that she wants to impose some retaliatory tariffs. It's really just to try to play this out in the public sphere, in the media, so that then they have more leverage against President Trump. But I don't think he's going to budge on this. He's just giving more time for the negotiation. Well, what are your initial thoughts there, Julie?
Well, I also think this is good. Look, it is so clear that this president is a businessman, and this is how business operates, right? You put out basically a threat, then there's some movement, and eventually an agreement is made. Now, Patrice, I heard something yesterday, and before the show, I heard you reference this. Is Trudeau, has he decided not to leave? What is this? You mentioned it, and I did not see the news on this.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, because we've got some audio to play from Justin Trudeau. But listen, he is trying to play hardball. The writing was on the wall for him after the election of President Trump. And frankly, I think a lot of Canadians, the time has passed for the ultra-liberal, heavy lockdown, heavy-handed government approach that he represented, right? And so suddenly, I think he's looking at this tariff fight as a way to salvage his political career. I think that's true of the Mexican president. She is using this as an opportunity to try to strong-arm President Trump to say, well, you know what, I can slap tariffs on Mexican avocados too. And, Taco Tuesday is just not going to be the same. Cinco de Mayo is not going to be the same without our Mexican avocados. So take that, President Trump. Well, this may end up backfiring on them. I did some research and just looked at the top imports from other countries to the United States. The top 5 are things like petroleum, which we get a lot from Mexico. But that said, we still get most of our crude oil here in Texas.
Yeah.
And if you remember, this week, President Trump also announced a new, he's going to be opening drilling in Alaska and a pipeline in Alaska to bring more domestic production of oil here. So that's going to, that means that we don't have to rely on the Mexican government in Mexico for oil, right?
Yeah. And all of these things take time. The thing that worries me a little bit, Patrice, is that, while Trump is doing all these things, I mean, it took Reagan something like 2 years to really turn the government or turn the economy around.
Yes.
Until we started to see sort of the what we know as this sort of booming Reagan economy. It's going to take a little bit of time for Trump too. And I do worry this constant hammering that the Democrats are sort of engaged in on, why haven't prices come down? I mean, look, we know. I mean, we know that people in this country suffer from amnesia because they're so forgiving. It's actually a good thing. They're so. I mean, Americans are
That's a way to look at it.
Americans are so kind, and what was the favorite phrase during COVID? Give grace. Americans gave grace and more grace and more grace and more grace, and then they'd had it up to their eyeballs, and then finally things started easing up, and Americans gave so much grace that many of them forgot what the government actually did. And I think you and I know that, especially at IWF and the work that we do through the network, is we try to constantly remind women especially, look, don't forget what these people did to you and your family. Don't forget how children suffered, how people died alone in hospitals,
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes this ability for Americans to forget and move on can sometimes also sort of I want them to also give grace to this administration and realize that some of this stuff will take time. Prices will come down. Let Trump do. What does everyone say now? Trust the process, right? So it worries me a little bit. I don't know if that worries you, but it's the kind of thing that I hope Republicans are going to message on this. And again, remind Americans that he's only been in office for 6 weeks. We got to give him time.
Well, I do think that they're going to give him time, Julie, and for 2 reasons. First off, and I made this point, I've been making this a lot on news outlets that I go on. First, it's that that the first round in the first Trump administration, President Trump imposed, pretty industry-specific tariffs, right, on steel, particularly coming from China and some other industries. The increase in prices was not really widely felt. There really was not a significant bump. So Americans didn't feel the impact of the tariffs under Trump 1.0. Under Trump 2.0, they're now thinking, well, wait a minute. I didn't feel an impact of tariffs before. I felt a whole lot of price increase impacts under President Biden and everything that he did, the massive federal spending, driving inflation higher, the higher interest rates that the Federal Reserve, imposed to try to tamper down on inflation. So I think that they're willing to give President Trump a pass for now. I think in a year, if prices are really taking a hit because of tariffs, all bets are off.
Right.
But at least for now, I think they're saying, okay, let's see how this shakes out. And, in listening to Democrats who support the tariffs, they're saying, well, President Trump is actually trying to fight for American businesses, trying to restore a lot of the production of the goods and things that we depend on. And we saw during the pandemic, to your point, Julie, how dependent we are on other countries for critical, life-saving equipment and materials, particularly in the medical industry. Why shouldn't we be producing the things that we need in a pinch? And so I do think that there are Americans who will give him grace. Now, listen, I'm a free trader, but actually now I'm more of a fair trader. And I want to make sure that, yes, we trade for what we don't really need to, or we don't produce efficiently. But at the same time, if this is a way to ensure that all of our trade deals are fairer to the United States, I'm a little bit open to it. And if tariffs are a way to also try to Make sure that we're also getting some other
Right.
changes in a
Yep.
foreign policy perspective. I'm open to it.
Me too.
So I think we're going to talk about Justin Trudeau, though. We've got this great audio because I'm glad you raised him. But let's get to traffic and weather. It is 5:16 WMAL traffic.
WMAL, making sense of the news.
All right, so Julie, you teed it up. You mentioned that Justin Trudeau has some news for us. He's going to be the champion against President Trump when it comes to the tariffs. So let's hear what he has to say, because we thought we were going to see the last of Justin Trudeau. We'd see his head and the door hitting him where the good Lord split him, right? Let's play cut number 1, Michael.
Yesterday, I spoke with President Trump, and I reiterated the facts. Our border is secure, and less than 1% of the illegal fentanyl entering the United States comes from Canada. Even so, we took action with our $1.3 billion plan to further strengthen our border. Canada's ministers, officials, and I will continue to engage with our American counterparts. Our goal remains to get these tariffs, all tariffs, removed. In the meantime, we'll be taking action to support Canadians through the tough times ahead. You can count on leadership right across the country, municipalities, provinces, and indeed, your federal government.
All right, so Julie, does that sound like he's leaving anytime soon?
No, my theory is that he's just really he's super motivated to figure this out because he's really going to miss that American booze that's been He's like, what am I going to do? He's probably hoarding it all. He was like, okay, the first thing is you take it off the shelf and then you deliver it to my house. Yeah. This guy has an ego, unlike we've seen. And I think it is very hard I think he sees this as an opportunity to maybe improve his legacy, which was in the toilet. He sort of resigned in shame. He's being attacked on the streets. He walks down the street and Canadians are yelling at him.
Yeah.
So I think he sees this as an opportunity to, again, save his legacy a little before he leaves. But I think it has a lot more to do with, we know this. How long have we been in D.C., Patrice? I mean, my goodness, these politicians, and no offense to anybody listening, but I mean, politicians, to some degree, you have to have a big ego to get, to sort of, do well in politics. But I think it's a little bit of, he doesn't want to back down to Donald Trump. He wants to be in this fight.
He wants to be in this fight. Now, remember when he resigned, he said that he was going to stay on. The timing of his departure would depend on the leaders, the needs of the next leader.
Right.
He said this will be a conversation up to myself and the new leader. But what sounds like now, though, is that he's giving himself more runway to stay in power.
Yeah.
And he's positioning himself as the right leader to take on Trump in this time, in this moment. So, it's not surprising that he's doing this. Now, to your point about alcohol here, we've got this really interesting story here. Bourbon. I can't even get the word out this morning, Julie. Bourbon is banned, California wine is canceled, and Canada is pulling all U.S. alcohol from its shelves.
Can you imagine having to rely on Canadian wine for your next dinner party?
I didn't even know Canadian wine was good. I don't drink wine,
it's interesting.
really.
I was in Canada, and up by Niagara Falls, there are a couple wineries that I visited, and it was lovely. It was, yes. So I should not disparage Canadian wine. I just think that having all U.S. liquor removed from those shelves is not the way to the heart of the Canadian people, Justin.
I'm pretty sure of that too. I mean, listen. So the bottom line here is that the tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods is delayed, but at the same time, the Canadians are taking their American alcohol off the shelves. I absolutely see an open door for speakeasies and for an illegal smuggling, a black market of American bourbon, American whiskey. I can see the cartel setting up shop now. So, you know what? I think this is going to take some time, folks. It's going to play out over time. President Trump is saying he's spoken to the president of Mexico. They're not going to do retaliatory tariffs for the time being until the negotiations are working out. So let's not get our undies in a twist. This is going to take time. It's going to play out over time, and I think we're going to see hopefully good results as a consequence. Meaning good results, meaning that we're going to get a good deal out of this. And if there's a deal maker to make a deal, it's President Trump. All right, it is 5:22.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 5:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. You're listening to O'Connor and Company. Good Friday morning, one and all. This is Patrice Onwuka. I'm here with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. I just want to take a moment before we do our rundown just to ask our listeners out there. We love Larry. He's going through a tough time with his family, as you guys know. So please keep him in your thoughts and your prayers. Hopefully he'll be back on Monday, but we're here holding down the fort for him. Now at 7:05, we've got Christian Daytalk, White House correspondent from the Washington Examiner. At 8:05, Susan Ferrecchio, national politics correspondent for the Washington Times. And at 8:35, Susan Crabtree is from Real Clear Politics, the national political correspondent, will be wrapping us up. As I mentioned, you're listening to me and Julie. And Julie, we have got DOGE on our minds. Listen, there has been so much this week. Frankly, there's been so much over the past 24 hours when it comes to DOGE and the efforts to right-size the federal government. That's what I call it, right-sizing the federal government.
Yep.
Earlier this week, we had an AP headline here that the Trump administration was planning to cut 80,000 employees from the Veterans Affairs Department, according to an internal memo. And then AP is also reporting that the IRS is drafting a plan to cut as many as 90,000 people from its workforce. Now listen, the IRS can actually, frankly, cut much more than 90,000. If you remember, yes. Democrats try to wave through 87,000 new IRS agents to come after us taxpayers because they think that we are stealing from the federal government. Hello, have you seen how much I pay the government in taxes? And I know you do. I want every penny back. But these layoffs, they're going to be across the entire federal workforce, and it could make up as much as a pretty significant amount of both of these federal agencies. Social Security Administration planning to lay off about 7,000 people, and Elon Musk is looking to prioritize the Postal Service and Amtrak. So there's a lot of changes going on to the federal workforce. And this is on top of the buyout. If you remember, I believe it was about 70 to 80,000 federal workers who took that very generous buyout package that President Trump and Elon Musk had offered federal workers to say, hey, if you are working remotely, you don't want to come back into the office, maybe you moved 50, 100 miles away from your location, you got a big sprawling palatial palace, or maybe your family situation doesn't warrant coming back. Go ahead, leave.
8 months of
Thank
pay
you.
and full benefits. It was very generous.
Yes.
We have a lot of sympathy for people in this area.
Yes.
Some of our listeners are people who suddenly are having to get back in the car, right? And take that horrible commute. And people have noted that traffic around DC, I've noticed is getting bad again. And we have a lot of sympathy for people, but I think Americans sort of just get it. They get that there has been so much waste and duplication of programs in Washington and inefficiency. And it's time. I think there is just a lot of goodwill for DOGE. Democrats totally deny that. They say that it's unpopular. And the reason they do that, Patrice, and I firmly believe this, I think their strategy is to drive a wedge between, or to split Republicans. Right now, I think you feel it. Republicans are really in lockstep.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some healthy debate, but I think that Republicans really agree that this all needs to be done. And I think what the Democrats are desperate to do is drive wedges, whether that's between Trump and Elon Musk, some of his cabinet members, and Elon Musk, or within the party itself, within Congress. They really want, and so we're seeing this narrative come from the Democrats that, DOGE is unpopular, things are unpopular, along sort of coupled with the prices won't come down, everyone's suffering. That really is a coordinated effort to sort of harm not just the reputation of DOGE necessarily, but sort of suggest that its intentions aren't good.
I think that's a good point, because remember, DOGE does not have statutory authority to do a lot of things. What DOGE is intended to do is to find the waste, fraud, and abuse, find the duplication, as you mentioned, and then make recommendations to President Trump, or really to congressional committees and to cabinet members as well. So to work with Congress, work with the cabinet to enact a lot of these reforms that need to happen. And so interestingly, yesterday, President Trump actually sat down with his cabinet. And from what we understand, he told his cabinet that, listen, when it comes to cutting federal workers, we need to take a new approach here. So far, the approach has been a hatchet approach, and now it's time for a scalpel approach, which means more intention, kind of slowed down the pace, and really turned the decision making around workforces to the cabinet secretaries who know their workforces, who know what needs to get done, and who are closer to understanding who the good folks are and who the bad folks are, who are mission critical versus those who are just collecting a paycheck. On Truth, President Trump said, "We just had a meeting with most of the secretaries, Elon and others, and it was a very positive one. It's important that we cut levels down to where they should be, but it's also important to keep the best and most productive people. We're going to have these meetings every 2 weeks until that aspect of this very necessary job is done." I think it's important for us to say, what, we all support right-sizing the federal government, but I think there's a way that you can do it so that it's both sensitive to the people who are losing their jobs, or the people who sincerely, and I have a ton of friends who are like, the fear factor right now in DC is high. People are on high anxiety. I get it. I also get, I'm in a family with a federal worker where our family has to rearrange our life because we've got kids. So I'm blessed to be able to help navigate that and be shuttling the kids to school and back and all of that stuff. But I mean, it's understandable. And so I think the way this was rolled out probably needed better coordination at the start. And so now I think you're seeing President Trump saying, okay, I'm seeing where this is going. I'm seeing what's happening. I don't want a wedge to be driven between Republicans, because we got some big ticket items coming up like tax cuts, and we want every Republican on board, not kind of throwing a tantrum over the workforce cuts. And then also recognizing that a lot of people who are being affected by these cuts are veterans, key constituencies that we really want to take care of. So that's right. We're going to have some more on DOGE and what's going on this week. There's just so much we can't get to in one segment. It is 5:44.
Chris Plant, weekdays 9 to noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Okay, Julie, I know daylight saving times is really hard for you and Larry on Mondays, because that's a whole hour that you've lost of sleep. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, don't even talk to me about it.
Okay, all right. Well, let's talk about our tax dollars going to support transgendering mice. How about that? I mean, yeah. So this is great. DOGE has uncovered some ridiculous, wasteful spending. I mean, the most ridiculous, asinine priorities. And I think it's encapsulated by this idea that our tax dollars have spending $8 million to turn mice into transgender people. The left has tried to bend over backwards. As you've said before, we were talking about this in our meeting this morning. They have bent over backwards, Julie, to try to deny that all of the federal tax dollars are wasteful, that these priorities are important. And it's not, and they've tried to deny it, but this is not the case here. So we've got a great clip. CNN, Van Jones, who gets, he's a broken clock, but he gets the time right a few times a day. He says it's not even real. Let's play cut 2.
The fact that he's cutting down stuff indiscriminately, less so.
Well, it's not all indiscriminate. I mean,
we don't really need the transgender mice, do we? I mean,
That's not even real.
It is real. I'm sorry, man.
No,
it's real.
It's not. No, listen.
Is it real or not?
Hey, hold on a second.
Did we have to say it was real or not?
No, hold on.
It's real.
I mean, Musk was a shield.
How about the
Is it a real thing?
No.
So, look, my point is...
Listen, they weren't talking about trans.
Don't defend the mice.
No. Listen, you don't want to talk about it? We don't talk about it. But it wasn't transgender. It was a different term that was misinterpreted as transgender. They were actually doing basic medical experiments on mice to figure out.
Don't spoil a good troll.
It's just not true.
Jennings is having a good troll.
Yeah, no, but you know what's so funny about this, Patrice, is the transgender mice has sort of become this symbol of how wasteful. There are hundreds of other examples, and Trump during his address went through a number of examples from Sesame Street in Iran and transgender celebration day in Guatemala. I mean, this is not the only example.
And here's the thing: CNN they fact-checked President Trump for talking about the transgender mice. Then they had to go back later on and edit their online post to say, no, it's actually true. The transgender mice thing is a real thing. So listen, the left, I love these specific issues because they demonstrate to the American people that the trillions of dollars that go into a black hole, those holes go somewhere. Yeah. They are burrowed across the world on priorities that most people do not think are important priorities.
Well, and again, you have North Carolinians living in tents. Okay, you have veterans homeless on the streets of New York. You have all sorts of problems in this country. You have a border that was letting murderers in, and then we hear that federal dollars are going to pay for transgender. This is enraging to people, and
it is enraging.
I want to just make one other point. You notice there's a subtle point there. At one point, because Jennings knew that CNN had to correct its own coverage, so he goes to the moderator.
Yes.
I can't remember her name. Goes to the moderator. He goes, "Didn't we have to admit it's true? Didn't we have to admit it's true?" She was completely silent. These moderators constantly interject to save the other panel, the leftist panelists who are on there, having their, being defeated by Jennings on a regular basis. And then when he said he never does this, he never asks for them to intervene, but he's just said, hey, just can you confirm this? Because CNN did confirm that this transgender mice thing was real, and she stays silent. It just makes me so mad because. Well, he is often just alone out there, the only one making sense.
Well, and thank God he's there.
I know.
He's able to take on all of these leftists, and they hate him for that. And I love him for that. He's good TV too. So in addition to the mice that we will no longer be turning into trans people, we're also seeing I guess we talked about it on the show earlier this week, but just the fact that there's so much federal property that is considered that may be sold off. We're looking at over 400 buildings, 400 properties, federal properties that may be sold off. Some of them are iconic buildings, excuse me, things in even in the Washington, D.C. area. Others are across the country. Some of them are in national parks like the Visitor Center. I saw a Washington Post article this morning trying to do a sob piece. Oh, it's going to be national parks, the visitor centers. You're not going to be able to go anywhere and understand what's going on, and it's going to be terrible. And they pull out this ridiculous example. This in Alaska, some sort of visitor center that gets a whopping, Julie, hold on to your seat, a whopping 600 visitors a year. A whopping 600 people a year. That's about, 50 people a month. Imagine keeping the lights on, the water running, staffing a building for one person a day at most. That is what DOGE is uncovering, and that's what we need to end on. So it is 5:53.